So we probably should turn it over to the next session, and Kelly Flanagan from Senate Environment needs no introduction. She's going to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, so my name is Kelly Flanagan. I'm the Global Warming Solutions Associate with Penn Environment. My background is in meteorology. I have a bachelor's degree in meteorology from the University of Miami and a master's degree in weather, climate, and society. So at Penn Environment, I basically am working on all of our climate and clean energy work. So that's our 100% renewable energy campaign here in Pennsylvania, and then also working to defend against all these federal rollbacks of our good climate programs that already exist that they're trying to get rid of. So I'm going to talk a little bit about both of those things. I will start and kind of give you a little overview of where we're at now in terms of renewable energy. Then I'll move on and talk a little bit about our state proposals and then get into those federal rollbacks. So to kind of give the vision of like what we want to see in terms of renewable energy, we believe that healthier communities and a livable future for our kids are possible now. We already have the technology to shift away from our dirty energy systems and more to one that gets pollution-free energy from the sun, the wind, the tides, and the heat of the earth. We also have the technology to dramatically reduce our energy use through conservation and efficiency, so that's not only good for the environment, but it's also good for our wallets, which is very important. And so, unlike coal and oil, clean energy leadership is not just concentrated in one part of the country. So this was a map that I found that's really cool that kind of shows how specific the areas where we can get oil and natural gas are in the United States. You can see there's these colors kind of pop up in different areas. That pink color is anywhere that we draw natural gas from, and the green color is where we draw oil from. Now contrast that to where we can generate wind energy. So this map shows basically the ratio of energy output to the maximum possible electric energy output, which, to put in simple terms, it's the potential for energy generation just from the wind. So as you can see, the center of the country, that's that real dark purple color, we can generate tons of energy from wind and it won't cost a lot of money, which is what you can see here. So this is, so contrary to what you might hear, coal and oil are no longer the cheapest electricity source. There's this huge swath of the country where wind is the cheapest energy source. That's that bright green color. And that includes much of Pennsylvania, as you can see right here. And while natural gas and nuclear do still dominate in other locations, that's that red color, we're already in a really good place as far as the affordability of renewable energy. And so I think this is just really telling of the argument that people make that we need to stick with what we're doing now because it's cheaper is just untrue. So as I said, renewable energy is on the rise. This is a graph of basically how the cost of renewable energy has changed over the past several years. So to give some stats, rooftop solar is down 54%. Utility scale solar is down 64%, wind is down 41%, battery storage down 73%, and the cost of LED light bulbs down 94%. So not only is it becoming more prevalent, it's also becoming a lot more affordable. Here's another graph, another kind of chart that shows that throughout the country we're consistently using more renewable energy. So I wanted to share some quick facts about the advancement of renewable energy from our recent report called Renewables on the Rise, which if you're interested, I can provide copies of that. So solar energy, America produces 43 times more solar in 43 times more solar power now than in 2007. Bloomberg New Energy Finance predicts that by 2025, solar could be cheaper than coal globally, even with the health and environmental costs of coal excluded completely. The solar energy industry employs more than 260,000 workers, which is more than twice the natural gas industry and twice as many as the coal industry. America produces 7 times as much wind power as in 2007, and overall 10% of America's electricity is produced by wind and solar. But here in Pennsylvania, we're really lagging behind. Pennsylvania only generates 2.7% of our energy from wind and solar, so we rank 34th in the country in terms of renewable energy generation. And then to go on to kind of a couple of the other areas, so energy efficiency. The average American uses 10% less energy now than in 2007. Electric vehicle purchases are surging. From 2015 to 2016, sales of EVs increased by 40%. And between 2016 and 2017, they increased again by 44%. So we're really moving into this era of renewable energy, and so we need, basically we need our government to catch up. So how do we get there? We need to set limits on carbon and greenhouse gas emissions to shift us away from fossil fuels. We need to work to reduce our energy use through conservation. We need to support the development of emerging technologies. In fact, if renewable energy generation grows at an annual rate of 15%, which is slightly more than half its current growth rate, wind and solar will produce enough electricity to meet our current electricity needs by 2035.
Sorry, which emerging technologies are you talking about?
I got a little sidetracked, but so emerging technologies, so basically supporting the growth of those technologies that, like wind, solar, all of the technologies that help to improve electricity generation and also improve our energy conservation. And then what'll kind of bring me into the next part of my talk is that we really need to implement policies to increase renewable energy generation, make it more accessible and affordable, and encourage adoption of clean energy at all scales. So that kind of brings me over to some proposals that are currently sitting in the Pennsylvania legislature that would help to build up our renewable energy portfolio in Pennsylvania. So the 2 that I will touch on now, they're not the only ones that are out there, but they're 2 that we have been dealing with the most recently. And those are community solar and 100% renewable energy by 2050. So I'll start with community solar. This bill was actually introduced very recently, just about a month ago, by Representative Santora. And unfortunately, Pennsylvania law does not currently permit community solar, but recently introduced legislation to change that. So it currently prevents more than half of Pennsylvania residents from benefiting from solar energy. So those are people who have, lack of a suitable rooftop, lack of financing, inability to afford a full system. But community solar would basically expand access and allow all Pennsylvanians the opportunity to, what did I just do? So basically, this community solar bill is a simple fix that would open up the solar market to a whole lot more people, so people who rent, people who can't afford to put solar panels on their homes, all of those things. So it basically just allows the opportunity for everyone to participate in using solar energy. So to give a quick overview of what community solar is, it's basically a pooling of resources to develop a project that provides the benefits of solar energy to a group or to a neighborhood. So essentially, you can think about you would have a bunch of solar panels in one area of your neighborhood, and you and all of your neighbors get your energy from those solar panels. So it allows multiple customers to share from a single power array, creates new economic opportunities because it creates jobs. There's potential for some tax generation, and we're investing in our local economies.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is this just that this whole array gets hooked up to the grid and that you've selected them, just like I select wind from Texas? Or do those solar arrays get wired to your house? That's the part I'm unfair, because that seems a lot harder to me. So
Yeah.
I don't know, does it work that it just goes into the grid and it's one big pool, but you're selecting them as your energy provider?
I think that there's different options for it. I think that, and I don't know as much about this as the other proposal that I'm going to talk about, because this is a lot newer and we haven't done as much work just personally at Pet Environment on it. But my understanding is that there's kind of either option, either like this is your neighborhood's power source, or it gets hooked up to the grid, as you were saying. So apologies that I don't have like a solid answer to it. Yes.
Kelly, most of the time, it's going right into the grid, unless you have a particular microgrid where it's in your field, and it is getting wired right into the local microgrid. Most of the time,
It would just go into the
it's
grid.
just going to the grid.
Okay.
You buy it the same way you buy wind power or whatever else.
Okay.
Thank you for the backup. So one of the big benefits is that it lets, people who rent or people who don't live in city areas to still use solar power. So there's tons of benefits for it. I'll just bring them all up. You can kind of look over them, but it, supports our local businesses and our local contractors, increases clean energy production, improves reliability of the grid, which helps reduce power outages, which is super important. It allows us to pool resources to build projects, so like you and all your neighbors can come together to get a solar panel installation in your neighborhood. And what I think is really important as someone who is, not looking to buy a home anytime soon, is it allows renters to be able to still access solar power and, contributes to a cleaner environment in Pennsylvania and helps. I wrote the same thing twice about the renters, so I'm just really excited about it.
So what happens in the Netherlands is that communities work with farmers because they often have many roofs. So they install the solar panels on those roofs because they have space, and that benefits both the farmers and the community. So that's because you have to have a space, right, where
Yeah.
you leave all those solar panels. So that's happening a lot now. So.
And wouldn't it be great for, those big office buildings and schools to have the solar panels?
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Yeah, there's so much roof space.
There's
Yeah,
a
so
building
it's
right
so
behind
Yeah.
this building, it's the track
Yes.
and field, the field house. It's got a big roof pointing towards the sunrise. It's
So-
just crying for solar panels.
So what is the barrier? The barrier?
So the barrier is basically that PA law currently does not allow this to happen. So
But if it
that's
gets
that bill that I
passed.
mentioned. If this bill gets passed, it literally, all the bill does is just removes that barrier.
So
It
then,
just makes it legal.
then there's absolutely no barrier to do this.
This ties in with a question that came up at the other thing around here about rooftop solars, and one guy was saying that PECO, I think I heard this myself, that PECO has to approve if you're tying into the grid and you're supplying energy, and they don't wanna reimburse you for more than, let's say, 110% or whatever, because they're actually stopping this from happening. What we're talking about here is because they're telling you, we don't want you producing excess energy. Well, why is PECO making that decision, or where's that coming from? That is PECO as a company establishing that we don't want people providing their own energy, you know what I'm saying? Is PECO doing that, or is that a state regulation for the utilities?
I think I'm not sure. Sorry, Peter.
Well, I think I can answer that. I mean, that has to do with the fact that you're being reimbursed at retail rates. What the law is trying to do is to prevent people from becoming wholesalers and being paid at retail rates. I think that's really what that's about, which becomes a problem if we had 80% residential solar feeding the grid. That too would be an issue.
Well, it's a problem for PECO not making enough profit, but I'm just saying, to change the whole way things are going, to get, more energy cleaner and not rely on PECO, who made a decision to buy from nuclear suppliers. After all this, they recently agreed to go nuclear, so, they're the problem, I think.
I think right next door we have a good example, and the guy from Montgomery County Planning Commission and others have pointed, New Jersey. In fact, you go to the map from the Energy Information Administration and look at New Jersey, it's got solar all over the place, they're popping up like dandelions. So,
Community solar, you're saying?
this is anything producing over 1 megawatt. So I think it'd be great in Penn Environment if you could talk, bring examples of how they're getting around whatever barriers. How did they do it?
Yeah, what are the barriers? What
Yeah.
are the barriers of PICO?
Get into
Telling
the
people.
nitty gritty
Yeah.
of, it doesn't look like New Jersey's worried about 80% going solar.
Well, in other words, the bill that you're talking about, will that take care of this problem with, it seems like PICO or whoever is putting a cap on how much energy we're allowed to produce?
I don't know about removing a cap on the amount of energy you can produce. I just know that it basically just removes the barrier to being able to
Well, same thing
do
as
a community solar
community,
installation.
yeah, it's the same idea. I mean, the community's gonna be providing more energy than PICO wants to pay for. Well, why is, they make, never mind.
PICO doesn't mind if you produce a lot of energy, particularly in on-peak times, because they need the energy then. It's really more, you gotta kind of pull the camera back a little bit, look at what's going on out into the future. This is the future. Decentralized energy production
Yeah,
is
sure.
what's happening now, will continue. And PICO, along with a lot of other utilities, look at it and go, oh my goodness, that's our business, what are we gonna do? And part of it is we're gonna shut down on the community choice aggregation right now, because they're just putting brakes on a little bit, so that it doesn't get out of their control so quickly. But it's going in that direction, it's what's happening, will continue.
Yeah, so that kind of brings me to the next part of this, which is like taking that 10,000 foot view and like where are we going into the future. Is there's currently legislation sitting in Harrisburg, didn't move it all this session, but to transition Pennsylvania to 100% renewable energy by 2050, and you can't see the 50 that's cut off at the end, covered by some notifications up there, but 100% renewable energy by 2050. So that bill was introduced in April of this year by Representative Chris Rabb and Senator Chuck McElhenney. It's House Bill 2132 and Senate Bill 1140 if you wanted to contact your representatives about it. But basically, what it does is it sets us up to get to 100% renewable by 2050 by placing interim limits on non-renewable energy. So we would want to be 50% renewable by 2030, 80% by 2040, and then fully renewable in Pennsylvania by 2050. That basically is done through the establishment of 3 different managing branches, which are the Energy Transition Task Force, the Clean Energy Center of Excellence, and the Council for Clean Energy Workforce Development. And basically what their job is to make sure that we make this transition as effectively and as ethically as possible. We don't want to just leave all the coal miners and all of the fracking people who work in these industries. We don't want to just leave them behind. We want to train them up and get them working in these clean energy jobs. So this would cover all sectors of energy production in Pennsylvania. So that's everything from electricity generation to heating to transportation, which is coincidentally the largest source of pollution in the country, and also industry.
Just to be clear, this is just getting your electricity to be renewable, right?
All of these things would be renewable. So electricity,
Oh, okay.
heating, transportation, and industry.
Okay. But not residences.
Everything in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
It would be Pennsylvania
Okay.
entirely.
Really?
Any kind of energy that is produced in the state would be from renewable sources.
And how would they pull the rug out from under fracking?
You know, that is a step along the way that needs to be determined, and so that's why these task forces are going to be put in place. It's basically going to be the job of these task forces to determine how to do that in the best way possible.
Good luck.
So, how does the bill define renewable energy? Which is a question that we hear a lot. So it basically is virtually pollution-free producing little to no global warming pollution or health-threatening pollution. It's inexhaustible, coming from natural sources that are regenerative.
What?
You'll see there's a reason I'm going to hit you again. It's the next part. But basically, so sources that are regenerative or practically unlimited, safe, having minimal impacts on the environment, community safety, and public health. So that includes solar photovoltaic, solar thermoelectric, thermal heating, offshore wind, onshore wind, geothermal. And it does not include, which is a question that we get a lot, it specifically does not include nuclear, and it does not include natural gas. And the reason it does not include those things is because they are not, they don't have minimal impacts on the environment, and they're not safe. So that's how those two things get pulled out of there, even though they produce less carbon than other sources. And then one of the most important things that I find most important about the bill is that it also focuses on energy efficiency and energy reduction, because the cheapest, cleanest unit of energy is the one that you don't use in the first place. So there's a lot of support for the legislation already. It has bipartisan support from 67 co-sponsors.
How is that divided? How many Republicans are in this?
You're
okay,
getting
okay, so I'm really
right.
curious.
So in the House, there's 44 Democrats and 7 Republicans. And in the Senate, there are 12 Democrats and 4 Republicans. And so if you want to know if your representative is a sponsor, I have a list. Come see me after.
Next question would be, how much are the other ones getting from the lobbyists?
So, that's a big barrier, and I'll get to that in a little bit, but there's a lot of coal and oil lobbyists.
I have a question. We're just about to have an election, so how many candidates have actually campaigned on this? Because see, that's the thing. They don't do that. They don't even campaign on issues. Like why aren't some people out there campaigning? I'm somebody for 100% renewable. I haven't found one. I can't get anybody to talk about any real issues. So
It
why aren't they
seems like-
doing that?
Yeah, and I don't have the
Because
answer, I'm
maybe
not a
they'd get
politician.
elected. It's like, especially if you're trying to overthrow Republicans, because this is not going to go anywhere as long as our legislature is controlled by the current parties.
I mean, there is bipartisan
Yeah,
support.
you
This
can't
is a
call
thing.
11 Republicans bipartisan. I mean, it's not nearly enough. So, I mean, but people could run on this, but they don't seem to do it. Do you know any candidate who's running on 100% renewable?
I am.
You are?
Yeah.
What are
I'm
you
running for
running?
the United States Senate. And this is totally non-political, I shouldn't say it.
Where?
Just because you guys, in Pennsylvania. You never heard of me because I'm the Green Party and we don't get a lot of publicity, but that's been the whole center of my campaign is the climate crisis.
Yeah.
We need to do something now, all these things. But you don't hear about it.
Well, I'm
because
glad to hear
Green
it.
Party.
There you go.
And there's a lot of Green Party candidates out there campaigning on this. So it's happening, we just don't hear about it.
Do we have any Green Party candidates in the Harrisburg legislature?
You have a governor and a lieutenant governor, but no state senate, no state reps at this point.
Yeah, so you can chat with him a little bit more about that after, since we need to keep this non-political. I know the election's close, I know it's on everybody's minds, I gotta rein it in. But another thing that we've been working on is trying to build support from those kind of people whose voice holds even more weight, and who are kind of experts. So we built up a really strong coalition of supportive community leaders in a bunch of different areas. So you can see we've had 188 people and organizations from 33 counties in Pennsylvania. If you don't know, there are 67 counties in Pennsylvania. So we're working to get at least someone from every single county in the state to show how big this support is. And you can kind of see how it breaks down as far as who we've gotten to jump on and support this. Obviously, the highest number is environmental organizations because this is what we do. But so we're working to build up those other voices. In addition, 180 mayors nationwide from 42 states signed on to a solar mayor's letter. Basically, that letter states that they support investing more in solar energy. And Pennsylvania had more sign on than any other state in the country. We have 43 of that 180 just from here in Pennsylvania. I also have a list of those if you want to know if your mayor's on. So there's also just tons of public support for this. To kind of give a little bit of a view of that, we've collected over 2,000 petitions, generated from our supporters over 1,000 calls to decision makers. In June, as you can see in that picture, we brought over 300 citizens to Harrisburg to meet directly with their legislators to talk about nothing but 100% renewable energy for Pennsylvania. And that day, actually, 4 more legislators signed on to co-sponsor the bill. And there's just tons of surveys that show that there is broad support for this. So recent polling shows that 71% of Pennsylvanians, including 52% of Republicans, want to see the state move to 100% renewable as soon as 2030. And there's just consistently high support for increasing the use of renewable energy. So you can see, this polling has been done every year since 2008, and there's just, for the most part, more than half of people are strongly supportive of this. And this is that same information in a line graph, if that's easier for you to comprehend. But as I was asked earlier, there is opposition. It's not going to be an easy fight. The fossil fuel lobbyists have tons of power in Harrisburg, and there are businesses and labor unions who actively lobby against renewable energy. So while we know that we need to achieve 100% renewable energy, many labor unions and legislators believe that we should be setting a much lower goal, or don't think that it's possible at all to power the state with only renewable energy, despite the fact that there have been numerous studies that show that it is possible. People just don't want to believe it. So with that kind of brings me to these federal rollbacks of good climate policies. There have been a lot lately, but I'm just going to touch on these 2 because I could be here all day. So to start, I want to talk a little bit about the Clean Cars Rule. The public comment period for this closed actually recently on the 26th, but I'll give you a little overview of what it is. So the old rule basically would gradually increase fuel efficiency through 2025. And then there's this California waiver that allows states to set stricter standards. Pennsylvania is one of the 13 states plus DC that participates in this. This is the old rule. This is how fuel efficiency requirements would change over that period. And so basically what those numbers are is the average miles per gallon of the entire fleet. So manufacturers have to ensure that their cars and light trucks are on average that efficient. So you can have some that are less, some that are more. And then Pennsylvania has benefited and stands to benefit a lot from this rule. We've saved $1.2 billion to date. And then by 2030, we could see $1,650 saved per household. We could save 14,072 Olympic-sized pools worth of gasoline, which is an insanely high number, and also create 26,400 new jobs just here in the state of Pennsylvania. So think about that, multiply it by 50. It's a lot. So the new proposed rule is titled the Safer, Affordable, Fuel-Efficient Vehicles Rule, which I personally think is ludicrous because they specifically made the acronym say SAFE, which it does not do. They just want you to think it does. It would freeze fuel economy targets at 2020 levels rather than increasing each year. So basically it would look like this. Instead, you would cut off the 2021 through 2025 increases. It also revokes the California waiver that I mentioned earlier that allows individual states to set stricter standards. So this will specifically affect Pennsylvania because we're one of the ones that have adopted that waiver. And unfortunately, the comment period for that is now closed. It closed on October 26th, so now they'll be reviewing those public comments. At Penn Environment, we submitted over 6,000 petitions, comments, and testimonies throughout the 3-month public comment period. So there are a ton of people who really don't want this to happen. So then the other thing that they're trying to do is roll back the Clean Power Plan, which has been affectionately referred to in the environmental community as the dirty power scam. And so the proposed rule is the Affordable Clean Energy Rule, which would amend the 2015 Clean Power Plan. The 2015 plan would have cut carbon pollution by 32% by 2030. And basically that old plan would have saved 3,600 lives, prevent 90,000, I can't read numbers today, sorry, 90,000 asthma attacks, and avoid 300,000 more missed work days a year by 2030. But the new plan will effectively keep dirty coal plants online longer, which just is going to dump millions of tons of more pollution into the atmosphere and slow the transition of the power sector to clean renewable energy, which we obviously need. And since air pollution and climate impacts don't stay within state borders, we need a strong national plan to protect our air. The negative health effects will far outweigh any cost savings. And so these are some of the results of the new proposed plan. And these are estimates directly from the EPA, who is putting forth this proposal. They know that it's a bad idea. But unfortunately, the plan was put forth anyway. And it basically would just allow states to set their own pollution standards instead of having a national rule, which, as I said, pollution doesn't stay within state borders. It doesn't care if you're in Pennsylvania or Ohio or New Jersey. It goes everywhere. So it needs to really be a national standard. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Noel, and then we could take any questions for either of us at the end of this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Was anyone at the climate change talk earlier? They introduced some of this concept there. Where's the maps? So which section?
I did open it up for you, so.
So the what we do at the CCL level. So the Citizens Climate Lobby works at the national level, and we've got a plan for what's called a carbon fee dividend. So it does a couple things. The first concept we want to introduce is we want to have a systemic solution. And a systemic means we have to influence the system. The entire system right now is a carbon-based economy. So I personally I have an electric car, I have solar panels on my house, I compost, I recycle, and all those things, but none of that matters as an individual. We have to change the system for it to matter, and the system is bigger than any one individual. And so what we propose at the national level is to put a rising fee or price on carbon. Okay, and any economist will tell you this is the most effective way to change a marketplace. So we put a rising price on carbon. I think it starts out at 15, it goes up by 10 every year, and until the problem is essentially solved. And so what we do with that in our proposal, we're not saying this is the only thing that can happen. First of all, I want to say everything that Penn Environment has proposed, we consider ourselves partners with them. We support 100% everything that they do at the local and national level. But we think this plan, in addition to those things, could be very powerful. So we put a rising fee on carbon, and that fee comes back to the federal government. And in the proposal we put forth, it would get distributed to the citizens of the country in equal shares. And so what we're trying to do by that is a couple of things. We want to defray the impact on the individual. So if you can imagine, we've just increased the cost of everything by putting a price on carbon. Gasoline costs more to heat your home, costs more to buy electricity. Everything just costs more. So what does that do to the individual, and particularly the folks that are on the lower quadrants of income? It means their cost of living went up. Well, that's untenable, right? So what we do And our solution is we take all of the revenue from the increased cost in carbon and we give it back to the people in equal amounts in checks. They get a monthly stipend, a monthly dividend that goes into their account from the collection of this. And it would defray the cost of that increased, cost of product, cost of goods sold. Those on the lower income spectrum actually get more than the increase in the cost of their lifestyle. Those on the higher income spectrum, because they live a, I would call it a carbon intensive lifestyle, because they fly more, they have bigger cars, they vacation more, all of those things cost carbon. The folks on the higher end of the quadrant would actually pay more than what they get back in the dividend. And so it does have some kind of a, social justice piece kind of built right into it. It's not 100% because, not every lifestyle is the same, but on average, those on the lower quadrants would make out financially, those on the upper would pay more for their things, but they can afford it. So that's okay. And the third part of our plan is pretty cool too. We have this thing called a border adjustment, and the border adjustment prices the embedded carbon in products, and it places a fee at the point of entry into our economy. So what that does, it doesn't punish our manufacturers who their cost of goods went up because we priced carbon, right? So when they export to an economy that does not price carbon equally, they will actually be rebated back the price of the carbon that they paid. And when we import, likewise, from an economy that does not price carbon equally, we will take a tariff from that on the way in. And what that does is it equals the playing field from a manufacturing perspective. And we believe that actually scales this plan to be beyond the United States. It actually, because we do have the largest economy in the world. So if we price carbon, and we make everybody that comes into our economy pay for the carbon, well, they're gonna rather pay their citizens than pay our citizens, so they're gonna price carbon. If you see how that would all work, it would create, the third piece, or the last piece I'll talk, it would create a market signal into the future, meaning carbon's gonna cost X in the future because we just told you what it is. And so the entire economy is gonna shift to low carbon solutions and really drive the systemic solution forward. That's the pitch. It's that simple, right? It's 3 steps. We price it when we take it out of the ground. We take all that money, we give it back to the people, and we have a border adjustment to protect our manufacturers. It solves the problem over a generation, I think. I think we reduce carbon in the economy by 50% in 20 years, and that just keeps going from there. The average dividend would be about $400 per month per family, and that's when it's fully implemented. And that's how it works. We'll take questions. Yeah.
So have other countries implemented this type of plan, including the border adjustment or not including the border adjustment?
Canada just implemented a plan very recently, if you saw the news. It does not include a border adjustment. Theirs is just in Canada, so what that does to their manufacturers is going to start making the products cost more. So yeah, the border adjustment's a key piece to this, to globalize it, to really make it work. But Canada just did it. There's a whole, if anyone saw The Economist speak, Tal earlier, he actually had a slide that showed what countries are doing it and what countries aren't. When I say doing it, I mean they're putting some price on carbon. Virtually every country in the world is doing it, except the United States. I mean, he showed the map and it had just like a blank where the US was. So China has a cap and trade system in place right now. Canada just priced carbon. They did one very similar to what I just described, except for the border check. So everyone kind of gets it. We're kind of going there. We just need to get our legislators to get it and to move forward and do that. And you made the point earlier about there's a lot of money involved in politics, and that does skew the decisions that they make. So we're trying. We have a bipartisan solutions caucus that's in Congress right now. There's 90 of them. There's 45 Republicans and there's 45 Democrats. They are allegedly working on solutions. We do think our legislation's in their mix, and we hope in the next Congress that it'll come forward. Questions, sir?
Yeah, you have a sense of this group you're talking about now.
Yeah.
Are they good with $15? I mean, is that like the number that they're saying, okay, this is kind of workable in terms of the politics?
I don't know what exact legislation, what price they have on it right now, but they do have a price. There was a plan, Corbello put out a plan that to price carbon this past year that didn't get anywhere. He's part of that caucus. Deutsch is another one from Florida. The Florida guys are starting to get it, the ones in Miami-Dade County, because Miami doesn't have long-term money left. So they're starting to get it, and one's Republican, one's Dem. I think Deutsch is now talking about bringing something forward in this next session as well. I personally, I know what we pitch to them, and we feed that to them, but a lot of things happen that we don't know about, and I don't know what the price will be when it comes out.
And also, Chris Rabb, who introduced the 100% renewable bill, next session he is planning to introduce some kind of a carbon pricing bill for Pennsylvania. So I don't know what that looks like yet, but hopefully we'll be working with him on that next session.
I missed Tao's talk, but did you have some sort of ballparks as to the cost of inaction?
He gave a good graph. I'll just try to describe it. I think he said there's a social cost of carbon, right? And he said there's a social benefit of carbon, right? Because it provides electricity for us. It's not, we don't say it doesn't provide value. And those graphs meet somewhere in the middle, which is what is that price? What do you call it? The damage due to carbon and the benefits due to carbon. His graph came out to about $200, roughly. It's what should be the price of carbon to net out the good and the bad, if you will. So roughly, that economist suggested that $200 per ton price on carbon would equate it to kind of fair value for it.
Versus what is it now?
0.
Oh, you mean additional to, okay.
The cost, so he did the cost of carbon, I guess the negative is $400 a ton is what he suggested. And we don't charge anything for it now. So we're beyond. He says if you put a fair price on it, which then reflects the positive that comes from it. Because again, our lifestyles are enhanced because of carbon, right? We all live it. So there's that price point that it makes sense where you can eliminate. If you put that $200 price, that's a big price by the way, on carbon, you will decarbonize the economy very quickly. It'll happen.
That would be including like health costs.
Yeah, of course, it includes all, yeah, that's the social cost, is
So
like
all
the
part of
cost,
social
yeah,
costs.
you got it.
Well, what about non-social costs like disaster recovery, infrastructure, rebuilding?
I think that's included in what they call the social cost, yeah.
Really? See, I don't consider that social, I consider that real.
Well, the cost to society, that's what
Yeah.
that means, the social cost, is all the costs to society, pollution, disasters.
What are you guys doing to make sure that this conservative version of your idea is not going forward? Because I think they really just hijacked your idea and made it really terrible, but they could totally pass that. Does that concern you, and what do you guys?
What's
one
the
where
conservative version?
absolves people of all legal these companies of all legal liability?
Yeah, I should read up on that. You mean if we put
There's
this plan in place, you are now forever held harmless?
Yeah, that's what they've got out there, yeah.
I'm not aware of that legislation, but yeah, that's interesting. So that's why, big oil, just so you know, our carbon fee and dividend, big oil is for it. They want.
No, they're for that bill.
Exactly. I'm
That is for
guessing
that
they want that piece thrown on the end.
Yes, that's the part that they want.
Yeah.
I have another question back to more years. The best thing I ever read about recently was that a couple of days ago there's a company in Radnor that's building a 70 megawatt solar farm down by Gettysburg, and it's all gonna go to cover 20% of the energy of the electricity in Philadelphia.
Yep.
Which sounds so great. So is that community solar? What is that? Because why aren't they doing more stuff like that with big companies?
It's not community solar because it was commissioned by the city of Philadelphia, which is like a public
So a
municipality.
state entity could do
Yeah.
something like this.
Yes.
So I'll give you an example of that. I work for JP Morgan Chase, just to say I work in technology. I'm not banking, I'm a technologist, but we just announced about 9 months ago that by 2020, and we are, so we're big. We've got the second most commercial real estate in the United States of America, outside versus the federal government. So we've got a lot of real estate. We've committed to go 100% renewable energy by 2020, 2 years, by doing exactly what you just described.
Yeah, and
We're building
Google's
wind
got a
farms,
dedicated
we're building
one,
solar
yeah.
farms, we're putting solar in all our buildings. The point of the day is a bank decided to do that, and banks do a lot of things, probably everything by business case. So that proves the point that renewable energies are now today a cheaper long-term investment than buying other energy. And again, it's all through, like we're building wind farms in Texas and solar farms in all of our facilities. So it is the price point, the price parity, and we're reaching it. We're there in certain markets today, and you're going to see as we build more, the scale drives the cost down more, and it's gonna take off.
Chase divest from the oil industry.
We do not invest in coal.
Not for oil or gas.
Yeah, I have to do research, but I'm 100% sure that we've stopped years ago investing in any new coal. Again, we have an investment bank, so they have to. We do have an oil and gas sector, so they do supply funding for some of that industry, yes, but not coal. Coal, they did the investment. Good question. Defending Chase here.
Well, here's another idea. I mean, I like this, but honestly, I don't think you priced it high enough. I also think that it's not gonna pass. I think it's much more likely that this horrible version of it's gonna pass, and, you know? So it's been hijacked, okay? So, but how about here's an alternate idea.
Sure.
Why not use the tax code and have every business deduction eliminated except for deducting for investing in renewable energy? I think that would be a real fast accelerator
I
in
would
the
love
economy.
to see that too. I'll sign up for that.
It's like, I mean, we need to get the money, they've got the money. They just got a tax cut where they got extra money that they don't even know what to do with. If we could,
Well, they know what to do with it.
yeah, well, I mean, besides giving it back to their shareholders and buying their stock, but I mean, if it could have been tied to, providing the capital needed to get us off of carbon, that would have been great, you know? And like, it still seems like you could jerry-rig the tax
There's-
system to do that.
There's all kinds of other things that should be done and maybe are easier to get past the finish line, like our renewable standard is like 10 years old.
What's
it's
the
about
renewable
to-
standard, what are you
Here's what it
talking
comes
about?
down.
So we have a goal for 0.5% solar energy in Pennsylvania.
Oh,
Sure, but who has to make a decision on that? It goes back to money.
Total.
It all goes back to money.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of money in politics.
Yeah.
And that's why our voices matter. I mean, we're fighting against a lot of lobbying, a lot of money. There was that Supreme Court decision probably 8 years ago or so. What was that called?
Citizens United.
Citizens United changed the whole calculus and what Congress does, because now they have unlimited money that comes from corporations and private, individuals, and it's not transparent. So that's the root cause of why. If you look at why the conversation changed from the 2008 election, when John McCain was going to promote also a price on carbon, so we have two parties both saying we need to fix this, to now one party does. Well, guess what happened? Citizens United happened, and then the floodgates opened, and then they just buy access. And that's what's going on. So our voices matter the most right now, because we're going up against a lot of money entrenched in today's economy, which is a carbon economy. So I love all the ideas, but our voices matter so much right now. Write, call, talk, vote, and that's what's going to change it.
It's almost 4 o'clock.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I think Kelly could probably tell you, there's more than one lobbyist in the extracted energy universe per representative in the State House. I mean, they just flood the building with people and with money. I mean, and if you talk to the representatives over there about why aren't you voting for this particular bill, because they didn't even vote on the bill that Chris Rapp put in. Because people come into their office and they say, well, remember all that money that you got last time around? If you vote for this bill, you're not going to get that money. In fact, your opponent is going to get that money somewhere. And they're all afraid of it. I mean, that's how they get into office.
So money is a problem, and that's why we need to.
Our counterpart in California, Environment California, they were a big part in passing California's bill, SB 100, which passed not that long ago. And we had their director come in and give kind of a talk on our weekly staff meeting a couple weeks ago. And one of the things that he said really stuck with me was that we tried to make the fossil fuel lobbyists feel like the loneliest person in the room, which is what we're going to try and do next session.
That's what it takes.
That's awesome.
Do you ever organize like pickets at like Americans is right here in King?
Oh yeah, so here's how we work at Citizens Climate Lobby. We don't. We actually take a different tack. We think that's part of the equation and it needs to happen. But our job, the way we see our piece of this is we actually are the ones that don't picket. We get lobby meetings with them. So we always treat every representative with respect and dignity, regardless of their positions. And when they don't take the position that we need, we ask them questions and we want them to we don't understand why. You know, we go back and research it and we provide more information. So we're the ones that we work differently. But we do think they all matter. The Greenpeace matters in the way they operate, the folks that picket, whatever the pipelines that are going through communities matter. And the way that we position it is that we walk in as folks that will meet with them, listen to them, and they listen to us in return. But we always get our meetings that way, and they are listening to us, and we hope to see some legislation that doesn't have that evil stuff.
I have another idea that maybe could help your idea with legislators. For the dividend part, why not say that it is distributed to everybody who files a tax return? Okay, so if you're not filing a tax return, you're not gonna get the dividend. So that would increase collections maybe of the, because apparently there's a lot of tax fraud going on in our country. And so again, it doesn't mean you have to pay taxes, but you know, you have to file a federal tax return in order to get this. And it'd be an easy way to administer it as well, it seems to me, to give the dividend back. But maybe the government would you know, say,
Yeah,
well,
I'm not
that could
sure
help
on
us
the
too.
distribution side. We think it's important that all residents get a distribution because they all are impacted. So.
Well, CCL did a study how to distribute it back either via Social Security or via tax via the IRS.
Oh yeah?
And so they concluded it was best to have a separate agency to deal with that. It was the cheapest and it was most efficient way
Really?
to deal with it. Yeah.
Could it be cheaper than we already using an existing infrastructure like the
Because
IRS?
apparently those organizations, they are already burdened with too much work, so they wouldn't be able to deal with that. And then you have to, have more people.
Well, I mean, it's just, the opportunity for fraud seems to me to be considerable with the way you guys are you know, people will just say, I have 6 kids and, you know, whatever, I mean,
it's got limits on that
there's a
too.
maximum amount you get, so.
Yeah.
whatever.
You got a built-in system for that
We
already.
do. Yeah, it's already covered.
So,
Thank you.
thank you for presenting on what's going on legislatively, we hope.
We're going to introduce next session, and we hope that, by the end of the next session, we'll have a separate energy.
So I'm gonna do a little segue because somebody asked the question, you mean 100% power or 100% everything?
Yeah.
Okay, so 100% power is the easy lift,
Yeah, I know.
okay?
But even that we're failing at miserably.
Even 100% transportation is doable, okay? Because you can make it all electric, right?
Those are the first 2 easy ones.
Now, you also asked, well, what about residential?
I know. That's
Okay.
the part.
So, one of the missing pieces here is this session that we're gonna be talking about right now, which is geothermal energy